thank you for attending so many events. And as I say, I know a good many of you do some of the morning concerts, or, well, it's technically not morning, it's like 12:30, but it feels like morning for me anyway. And then coming to these talks, thank you very much for committing to the festival as you do. So last year we had, for the first time, a photographic exhibition here. Christy McNamara had his photographs here that are mainly focused on photography of traditional musicians and the environment around that. And so we were kind of, we had inadvertently started something that we hadn't done before, which was having like a visual component to the festival. But the next move became quite obvious fairly fast. That, of course, Tim Goulding here is a member of the community here, a much loved member, as from what I hear and from what I get, a very strong sense of that. And we're in, technically now, the music room, which is the exhibit that you see all around you, which is connected to musical thinking and musical ideas, which hopefully we'll explore a little bit in the conversation. Now, what do I know about art? That would be exactly nothing in that sense. Like I wouldn't be able to explain or talk about any of these paintings in any intelligent way, I don't think. But I did, like I hadn't seen any real artwork until I moved to Chicago in the mid-'80s, and I went to the Chicago Art Institute when I kind of woke up a little bit and decided I needed to learn about the world around me, and that was an absolutely fabulous experience. Now, I still don't know anything about it, but I gave up trying to know and said, you know what, just experience it, just give up the judgment. I'm not in a position to really know, but I could maybe enjoy, which I think is the ultimate goal in all of this. Now, I was, trying to think what relationship do I have to Tim Goulding? What like there must be something we have like that kind of can connect this conversation. And there was a very obvious and interesting thing that I came across, which was Tim's experience growing up with his father, who was a great collector of art. And so from your earliest years, you were around art. And further than that, it was conversation and discussion with your father about what's good, what's not good. Like an invaluable kind of education that you couldn't actually get in a university, I think. And so that grounded you in a way. Like, so that was absolutely identical to my musical knowledge. So I didn't study music, you didn't study painting. Now, we studied other things, like, well, in my case, not great success, but I did study other things. So I think it might be nice to kind of kick off from that point of view about, like, the kind of deep knowledge that comes to you from that kind of experience of growing up with the art all around you and with a father who could kind of inform you. So please, Tim Goulding, ladies and gentlemen, wonderful artist, and off you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. That was really good, because we chatted this morning about our fathers and how influential they were. Yeah, I think my dad was probably an artist monkey, as they say. That he, I think he'd loved to have been an artist, and in a way, I lived out his dream. Because I mean, he was a businessman. He was last of the Renaissance men, I think. He was Irish squash champion. He played football for Oxford and all these things. He was a businessman, a wonderful gardener. So I mean, very hard to fill his shoes. But the one thing he really loved was art, and he collected art, particularly contemporary Irish art, and encouraged a lot of artists. So from a very young age, we had that generation of Irish artists coming to visit, plus some international artists. I remember Henry Moore, the great sculptor, English sculptor, came to visit and came up to my studio. And I was working on a kind of an abstract painting. It was like a Morandi painting, 3 pots on a ledge. And Henry Moore came in and he said, well, that's not really going to work because you're trying to keep it all on the picture plane. It's either illusionistic painting with space in it, or it's completely flat. And you can't make a painting that's trying to be illusionistic and flat at the same time. And I said, okay, and I've been trying to do that ever since, actually. But
the idea of, let's say, your paintings here, like which are musical in nature, as you've described, and I'm sure there are uninitiated viewers here, just like me, people who are going, how to think about this? How would you say to somebody, okay, go up to that painting over there and take a look, and here's how I want you to be. Mm-hmm. Here's how I want you to kind of engage. This is what I think you should do. Do you want to?
Well, I was telling Martin this morning, Agnes Martin, the great abstract painter, she said, I start from a complete void. I know nothing. My mind is a blank, and I wait for what comes out. And then she was talking about the difference between music and painting. She said, with music, pure emotion can be experienced directly, but with painting, they want an explanation. And in fact, they're the same thing, because you might listen to, say, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, but you don't say, what's it about? But you look at an abstract painting and say, what's it about? And it's actually about what it is. Yeah. What you see is what you get. So in some ways, I prefer people just to look at a painting and just experience it, the line and the shape and the color and the harmony. On another level, I can explain how these paintings came about. And just a preamble about that is, throughout my life, I've worked as a painter in series. So when I came to live in West Cork in 1968, I sat outside painting the landscape. That was the first learning how to paint, because I never went to art school. Learning how to be really kind of realistic, if you like, painting what I saw. And then I've gone through so many different stages, and I'm reminded of the Spanish painter Joan Miró. Mm-hmm. And he found an old railway sign outside his house, and it said, "No train stops here." And that's my philosophy about painting, that whatever I'm working on is a reflection of what I'm going through in my life. And so it's taken enormous swings from very realistic things to completely abstract things and in between. And but these ones came about a little bit because I'm a sort of a bit of a fraud musician, I call myself. But we were talking about frauds this morning, and you're saying there isn't really a fraud, is there?
No, and to the degree, yeah. Well, yeah. A fraud, like, there are fraudulent musicians out there, but mostly, and they can be quite good. But I think, well, yeah, our conversation it was a little more subtle in that we were kind of coming to the idea that, like, virtuosic perfection was not really the goal, that technical accomplishment was far from it, and that we could admire virtuosity and skill, but we can't experience admiration. In a sense, it's not a thing we're looking for. Admiration is a different kind of thing. But being impacted through expression in music or anything like that doesn't always require like technical virtuosity at all. No. And so, like, simple, humble musicians would have taught me way more than many of the whiz kids, as it were, and so the quality of expression is a much more important thing than the virtuosic display of skill,
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah. Well, our band, and Ivan's here with us today, and so is Joe. Dr. Strangely Strange, we're called. We started off in 1968 or so, And there was a review by B.P. Fallon of our music in the Irish Times, and it said, they're out of tune, they're out of time, but they're in tune with their times.
Oh, yeah. Well, that actually, you know, when I listened to some of the first recordings recently of the band, and it was you know exactly when it came from. Like it definitely had the sound of its times.
It did.
and the dress and
Yes,
the look.
the dress. Yeah.
I'm trying to. You know, I know there's an old hippie background here and stuff, and I'm trying to picture both you and Francis here as West Cork hippies, you know, but your pasts have caught up with you, and your hippie stuff is gone, and I can no longer see the hippie. But anyway,
well, it's not quite that, because the hippies still live in alleys, but they've had hip replacements.
They've had hip. Very good. Very good. Very good. That's a line.
Yeah.
That's a good line. Very good. Yeah.
But,
hippies with hip replacements.
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Of course, it changes everything. But yeah.
But I was going to explain a little bit.
Yeah.
Mentioning no names.
Yeah. But we were chatting earlier, and I said, you never hear of the sons of small farmers becoming hippies. It just simply never happened. Like, it was inconceivable for me and my neighbours to become hippies. So you had to come from at least a good middle class or upper middle class background in order to rebel against something and want to go in the opposite direction. But we were still aspiring to the middle class, so we couldn't actually rebel. We needed to have something, you know, to rebel against.
Yes,
you know,
yeah.
like we're actually looking to get somewhere. So I remember when the first hippies visited and came to East Clare. In fact, there was a fella called Bill Sampson that arrived, and myself and my father were up the side of a hill digging a drain. I'll never forget this. And I'm helping him, and we see this fellow coming across the field, flowing hair and a beard and leather pants and flowing clothing, and we go, what is this? Who is this? And so it was Bill, and he says, I heard you own a house up here. We would like to buy it. And like, it was a ruin, you know, and it was Paddy Canny's old house. And but it had come into our ownership of my father. And so we sold Paddy Canny's old house. This is a real traditional music reference here, but, to Bill and Anne. And like, it was like, for me, it was such an experience to go up the road and visit this house, which I did over and over and over for the years, like trying to kind of understand the hippie consciousness. Of course, I couldn't really, but I never stopped trying. You know, I was going, I want a bit of this. I couldn't imagine the freedom experienced in this, because like we were down the road saying the rosary, you know, and like I was going, God, I really think I wish it could be this hippie thing instead, you know. But anyway, it wasn't to be. But anyway, sorry, I'm tracking into my whole. Anyway,
of course, hippies never wanted to be called hippies, or
no. But we have to call them something. But and like even the word "them," you know, like kind of screws the whole thing up. But anyway, it's I never got to visit your house, but I visited your neighbour, Charlie Turrell, another painter. And it should be pointed out that both you and Charlie are next-door neighbours. Is that right?
Yes, we are, indeed,
and you're both members of Aistana.
We are, yeah.
So Aistana, for those who don't know what that is, that's an organisation where only the most esteemed artists of the country can actually get in the door at all, and it's kind of it's a very select grouping of people. Like, but there's two next door neighbours there. Yeah. But I just, there was something when I visited Charlie many years ago. He said something that never left my mind, which was, we had this discussion, Helen O'Leary and him, and the question came up was, what was the most important thing? Like the one indispensable thing that allowed you to ever become like an artist, a musician, or whatever. And we came to the conclusion, which was fascinating, which was somebody to believe in you.
Wow.
Somebody that actually, like somewhere along, there could be different people, but the belief of others was like a really important thing in order for anybody to flourish, because you would meet these impasses. And without those who believed in you, you might just turn back right at that moment. Do you have any experience around that?
Well, it just reminds me a little bit of Louis Le Brocq, the painter, and people, some couple came and said to him, our son is trying to decide what he wants to do in his life, and he's thinking of becoming an artist. And Louis said, well, never think of becoming an artist. He said, it's not something you decide to do, it's something you have to do. So in a way, it's a calling or a vocation. It's just something you go through. I mean, most artists have other jobs too. It's painters anyway, day jobs. It's just something. Well, for me, I've never seen much difference because I started off wanting to be a poet at school, and I thought I was going to be a poet. But
you are a poet.
I am a poet to some extent. So poetry and music and painting for me are all pretty much the one thing, because they come from the same source, which is expressing your inner life, expressing how you react to your life as it goes along. And it can come out in words, it can come out in paint, it can come out in music. That's how I see it, really. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. The Doctor Strangely Strange. Yeah, that's where we got sidetracked. The album.
No, it's
cover.
okay. No.
Yeah, and we were. You said to me earlier, like, "Well, we couldn't play, or we weren't like super musicians." And I think that's where the conversation earlier on had turned to this idea of that doesn't really matter,
No.
And if it does, one is missing the point entirely. Yeah. Would you say the same applies in the world of painting? Is there, or maybe one needs to actually be able to paint?
Well, they talk about the 10,000 hours, don't they, for anything you do. And I, in a sense, put in my 10,000 hours. Yeah. And then I see what's called Sunday painting or amateur painting. It's a difficult one because I love to see people painting anyway, whether they can or they can't. Yeah. But I think to achieve anything, you do need to put in the perspiration. And I did. I mean, I used to paint 10 hours a day when I came to live in West Cork. And
when you came to live in West Cork, that was kind of, post the initial phase of Dr. Strangely Strange.
Yes, yes.
So you did that, and then you said, okay, the rock and roll lifestyle. Okay.
Well, I realised I was a better painter than a musician, so I decided I better get down to it. And so I resigned from the band in 1971 or 2, and came to live a very different life, because we'd been cruising around England in a transit van, which was a great experience, age sort of 24, 25, and played all over England and a little bit abroad and lots of Ireland too. And we had our moments. But we never got paid more than £1 a day, mind you. And even on our tours around England, we never slept in a hotel or B&B. It was always at the end of the night, would anyone have a floor?
Yeah, I know. I did those kind of tours.
You did,
like it was, a hotel seemed like a quite exotic thing.
Oh, very much so, yes.
Like B&Bs were quite a big thing here. Like if you could stay in them, and but like the first tours, like that I did in the States, were staying in people's houses.
Were they? Yeah.
And which was great, but. Not being able to find your own space, like which you do kind of need, and feeling obliged to kind of sit up having polite conversation all the time when you're thinking, I wonder, could I slip off to that bedroom now? Or would it be appropriate? But anyway,
I know.
Yeah, that's like now. You said a couple of things the other evening when we opened the exhibit that kind of give a certain hint of a deeper kind of philosophical view of life, which is ultimately where I would love to go with this conversation. And one thing you said was you quoted John Cage about when he comes into the room that his friends come, his enemies come, his thoughts come, his ideas and everything, and they begin to leave the room if he says long enough. Am I getting this?
Yes,
right?
yes,
one
exactly.
by one, and if he's lucky enough, then he himself
leaves as well,
room, which is like like a very important kind of part for any artist, I think, is like one of the things you can see in artistic output is ego. And it destroys.
It does.
Like almost anything, when you see it, you just don't want it anymore, and so that's like the virtuoso sometimes can be quite egotistical, because they can do a lot of things, but sometimes you don't enjoy it. But anyway, that was one thing. The other thing you said was there are no others.
Yeah, so I quoted the great Indian sage of the 20th century, Ramana Maharshi, who he sat pretty silently most of the time. He didn't speak very much, but people came and asked him things from all over the world. And someone said to him, "How should we treat others?" And he said, "There are no others." Which is really quite devastating in a way, because although we're all little bits of moon dust, of course, or stardust, we're all made of the same thing, all in different shapes and sizes and personalities, but we're basically all the one thing.
So the hippies and me, we're all...
Exactly, yeah. I mean, President Trump and myself are the same.
Oh, God. yeah. Well, it is a reality to face up to, isn't it?
It is a reality, yeah. I mean, if you're going to take that point of view, you have to accept...
He's a human being.
The whole lot.
Yeah, he's a working human being.
The trouble is the overlay on top of what we are, which is what you were describing, the ego, which is the most destructive thing.
Yeah.
And as you said, in all of the arts, the best happens when you're not there.
Yes, which is...
when you're not there. You're there, but you're not there.
Yeah, exactly. And suddenly everything becomes easy.
Yes, exactly.
It's very easy to do anything when you surrender the self-concern. And it's very difficult to do anything with a continuous self-concern about how good is the thing I'm doing, how, will people like it, should I do this, any of that nonsense, is absolutely self-fulfilling, and it means that, yes, nobody will like that.
Yeah,
good.
Absolutely.
But you learn bit by bit, I suppose.
You do, and even still at this advanced age, my mind is my biggest enemy. I mean, I fought many wars, but all the wars have been with myself.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that it does fascinate me, and why I've been looking forward to this conversation, is that, and it's something that I wish would happen for traditional music more, is to get into the dialogue with other artists, because the journey you go on is a very important one, and it's kind of an open discussion in the world of painting and art. But in the world of traditional music, we'd prefer to, the musicians would genuinely kind of not always engage in this conversation, and instead kind of maybe go for a pint and pretend nothing, And but I do think there's so much to be learned in the dialogue between artists of different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And you yourself are kind of fortunate in that you actually inhabit at least 3 art forms. And so, very few of us do that. I mean, it looks like you have a beautiful life crafted, because you write poetry, then you go into your studio, you work on music, you mix music, then you paint, and you live in an incredibly beautiful place, looking out over the ocean, surrounded by beauty. And I'm going, I go, why isn't that my life? I should have Charlie's life. I should have your life. It seems so fascinating. But anyway.
Well, I mean, all of us now live in a world where there can be bliss, but there can be terrible tragedy and suffering and sorrow, and especially as you read about all the wars and everything. And it leaves a scar on your consciousness, whether you like it or not. But recently I've been thinking that one of the wonderful release from that and fulfillment from that is the arts, is creativity. Going into that place, whether it's in music or painting, which is like a haven, which is like the crock of gold, or whatever you'd call it. Can't think of the word, but it's a place where when you start playing, or you start. All of that, I think it's the best thing you can give the world, put it that way, is to play or to paint or compose or sing or dance, and do it like pedal to the metal, as hard as you ever can.
Yeah.
Now, even more so now, with the sorrow in the world.
Yeah.
Really, really, like as if there's no tomorrow, which there isn't, mind you.
Yeah.
So I think that is a wonderful, wonderful thing to have.
Yeah.
To have as a resource.
Because it's an interesting thing. There's a conversation out there in the world about like how arts can help the world and how arts can help Ireland. How all these things like. But politicians like that kind of discussion and the government like that discussion. But deep down, they do not like the implications if we actually get to the truth of it.
Yeah.
Like it would turn the world on its head if they really wanted to, embrace the artistic view of life.
I know.
It would like just absolutely. Well, they would consider they would be threatened by it immediately and shut it down.
Yeah.
I think, but it's. Do you think kind of politically, philosophically that way about like what you think the arts could do in this society or in any society?
It's a good question, because a lot of the early artists in the 20th century all thought that it was going to completely change the world, and I'm not sure if it does. What really changes the world is yourself. If you change yourself, the ripples can go outwards. I don't think very much politically. I do think more philosophically. Philosophy actually means love of wisdom. And I would say to try and find wisdom in your life, in yourself, it can be contagious. It can help. Well, obviously, first of all, it helps yourself. So I don't know. I don't think politically, I must admit, because I think in a way, I suppose I'm more like a quietist. I think being quiet, being still within yourself, can probably help others.
I think I'm in your camp.
Because I think, man's inhumanity to walk to man. I mean, 190 million people were killed in the 20th century in wars. And so did the politics help there? I don't know. Maybe it did and maybe it didn't, but it was often a cause of it. And often religion was a cause of it. And basically people are fighting over ideas, basically, And ideas might actually be the problem. There's a Zen man who said that enlightenment is easy, just cease to cherish positions, or cease to cherish, judgments. Just so if you're really quiet, I think that's a great gift to the world.
Do you meditate?
I do. I'm a very bad meditator, though. But I do, because being quiet is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's right. At some point, I've been reading this and that, and after I've been going to the Art Institute in Chicago and everything, and I'm reading this book, that book, the other book, and the word meditation was cropping up everywhere, and I think I'm going to have to do this. I can't just keep reading about meditation is this, meditation. So I decided I would go and have it explained to me, and and get a little
in a sense,
guidance.
we are all meditating. We're the life force. There's a thing happening inside us that's happening all the time, whether you're fighting a war or whether you're Trump or whatever. There is a natural meditation. Meditation being the life force in us. And I don't think you have to sit down and assume a position or anything like that. But I think of Paul Gauguin's famous painting called "Where Have We Come From? What Are We Doing? Who Are We and Where Are We Going?" And I think I would call that self-inquiry. And I think that's really the thing for me, is observing the mind, which is the most useful thing we have and the most hideous thing we have. Like with a knife, you can save someone's life, and you can kill someone with a knife. You could do surgery or you could kill someone. And the same with the mind. It can lead you up terrible blind alleys. It can put you against your fellows. And yet it can be most creative and wonderful thing. So it's observing. That for me, self-inquiry is the interesting thing.
But when you said you were a bad meditator, I'm reminded of the fact that I think everybody who meditates or attempts to do so would consider themselves a bad meditator.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's just nothing. You know?
Exactly.
There's just nothing.
Exactly.
There's nothing. You get nothing. There's nowhere to get. Nothing happens. No magic happens.
No.
Nothing. You just do it. So, but that's the whole point.
That is the whole point. You've said it in one. Yeah, that's exactly it.
And it's actually not so easy to do. But I found that, I found a direct relationship between that experience and the experience of music, and that is really what we were speaking about earlier with the John Cage. Hopefully, I leave the room as well.
Hopefully, I leave the room.
Yeah, and like even to play music, it's like if I could actually vanish, you know, that's when it could actually happen. You know?
Yes.
But that making it vanish is not so good. It doesn't respond to being made.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't.
Being forced.
And you can't think yourself into not thinking.
No.
So meditation is not what you think.
That's right. Yeah. That's a very good line. Did you just come up with that?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Okay, very good. Yeah, that's actually a brilliant line. The more I think about it, meditation is not what you think. That's a bumper sticker.
Yeah,
absolutely right there. And
I collected bumper stickers when I was living in Miami.
I saw one in Seattle that was good one time. You know, there was like the religious right in America were taking over politics and they were, and then we find out that they have this idea about the rapture.
Oh yes,
like
yes.
They are going to get lifted up. The rest of us are going to be stuck here because we're not involved, you know.
No.
And they're going to be saved, and the whole thing is just going to go to hell. But I saw a great bumper sticker in Seattle. It says, "After the rapture, can I have your car?"
Very good. I saw one that said, if you love someone, let them go. If they don't come back, hunt them down and kill them.
That was a poster in my apartment.
What was it?
Dennis Cahill had a kind of a funny sense of humor, and he had that poster like he said, "If you love them, let them go. If they don't come back, chase them down and kill them." You know, it was like,
I have a feeling you might have written it.
It was very funny. Anyway. Okay, let's get back to the subject at hand.
I was going to say something about how these paintings came about.
Please, absolutely. That's the key.
To get onto the
piece of information.
And because at school I studied classical music up to the age of 12 or so, and then it became too much like maths. And girls came, and you weren't so interested in all that. So, but these are kind of based on a score, let's say. So the staves are going from left to right, or if you're recording digitally, it's like the timeline is going from left to right. And on the score, the notes are appearing different positions. And so these paintings came about with the horizontal lines, which are the staves, and then stuck onto them the little squares of colour. Now, generally speaking, I mean, the way I've always painted it is that I love to feature a particular colour because I'm in love with colour. That's why I became a painter. Mm-hmm. And so the soloists are the bright colours, if you like. And then the background singers are there, and then the actual sort of melodic area is the complete background. So there are little spots of highlights. So basically, when I make a painting, I'm building up to the main colour. Or there might be three soloists, let's say. I don't know if there's one of them here. Yeah, well, this one here. There's the sort of horizontal lines, which are the staves, and then the notes. And probably the soloists would be the green and the yellow and the mauve, and then the background singers would be the red and the deep colours, and that's how they were they came about, and all different variations. And also a great inspiration for me is obviously where I live, the nature and the flowers. And the flowers became like food for me, especially when I was ill. Mm-hmm. When my dad was dying of cancer for several months, I was with him. And for him, he couldn't eat in the last few months.
Right.
But he had all his paintings, and we'd bring them by the bed, and he'd look at them for hours, and he'd said, paintings are like food for me now. And for me, the flowers are like food for me.
Right.
Yeah. So, for instance, I might see at the moment there's what's the ragwort
Right.
and the yellow, and then there's the purple flower. What's it called? Yes, exactly. So I might see those two, and I might make a painting with contrasting those two. They'd be my soloists for the month, you know.
Would you say like there's just a lot of like when you create things like there's just the serendipity of just like whatever, like and that serendipitous information is coming at you from every direction all the time.
Well, for instance, I did a series before this series. I did a series called Patching the Void, and that was based on my neighbour's carpet. She was throwing out an old rotten carpet. And for me, I looked at it, and it looked like it was like a crock of gold. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and she wanted to put it in the bin. So I got it, and I did a whole series of paintings, the warp and the weft, and that became a series then. Yeah.
All right.
So out of the blue, something can come to you.
Yeah. So if you get commissioned to do something, then that's a problem, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate commissions.
Yeah. So you'd have to walk around not thinking about your commission for a while.
Yes, you would.
And wait for something to just kind of hit you in the face, like, you know, just go, yeah, okay.
I got a commission from Guinness PT Aviation. That there was a big company that leased aircraft.
Yeah.
I got a big commission. This is back in the 70s. And I had to do, the theme of it was flying and money. And I thought, so how am I going to paint flying and money, you know? And in the end, I did a big canvas. I rented an airplane, and I went over Inch Strand with my brother, who's a pilot, and looking down at Inch Strand. So I did this sort of very realistic background and then I did the wing of a 737 in the foreground, all done with coloured pencils, actually. It was a huge, big painting. And in the top right-hand corner, I just had the arc of a rainbow. And I went up to give the painting to the man. And first of all, he said double or quits. It was £1,500. And so it was going to be 3,000 or nothing. And I mean, this was going to be my wages for 6 months, you know. I couldn't do it, I didn't do it. But anyway, he said, where's the money? And I said, at the end of the rainbow. I said.
How did he?
He loved it, yeah.
Good. So you doubled it the other way around, you? Okay, good.
So, yes, I've done lots of series of painting. As I was saying, they sort of follow my life. Yeah, I think we're getting time.
No, it's fine. I see the audience kind of like...
They're getting itchy.
No, they want to ask you questions. I can see it. Am I right?
Yeah. Yes.
Does it, like, because, like, as I say, I know nothing. So I've been asking enough questions now, but... Well, one second. We have a roaming microphone. Now, we can hear you, but we want the rest of the audience to hear you as well when you ask the question. Otherwise, they have no idea what it's coming, a microphone for you.
It might be coming to a gentleman I'd love to introduce you to.
Yes.
Yeah. David Syme and Suzanne Syme. Now, David has really inspired me in the last couple of years because I loved classical music, and I'll go off on a tangent here. We were Strangely Strange were interviewed a few years ago, and we were asked what was the format of music when you were growing up, you know? And Ivan said he said I was listening to modern jazz, and Tim Booth said I was listening to Americana, and I said I was listening to classical music. And they asked Joe, who's the young lad in the band, he said I was listening to nursery rhymes. But that leads on to the last 2 or 3 years we've been going to David's. David is a maestro, a classical pianist, and he hosts these wonderful concerts in his home, which is the way to hear music. And Suzanne is superb. Pastry chef isn't the word quite, but something like that. So you hear an hour of music, and then you fill yourself up with as much sugary, lovely delights, and then you go back and hear some more music. But why I'm saying this is that David's really reinvigorated my love of classical music. And I go there listening to what he plays and listening to, trying to get into the head of the composer who wrote them. And then I've been reading the biography of the poor old composers who often had terrible lives, but it's fascinating.
But they were deeply aspirational people.
Absolutely
and
deeply.
Had very
was the only
deep
thing.
Spiritual yearning
Exactly.
That they wanted to satisfy in musical expression.
Exactly, you said it.
That's great.
Yeah. Anyway, I think David wants to say something.
Well, Tim Goulding, whom I refer to by different aristocratic names and titles, but he's one of the great inspirations of my life. And I just wanted to mention, could you bring to mind one of your opening acts back in the 60s who went on to become a very celebrated musician? I think you're being too modest with your musical accomplishments.
Yes. Well, how do you mean the acts?
Well, I know who it is. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I do.
Elton John was an opening act.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I see what you mean.
Matt? Oh, yeah.
Well, that was our high point because we did a gig in West Wickham, west of London, and we were top of the bill, and Elton John was supporting us. So that was our big moment. But he went up and we went down. Yeah. So we did have a few little brushes with.
But you're still recording. This is the thing.
Yes.
That the Dr. Strange is not in the past. You're currently making an album.
We are. We're recording the last couple of songs next week, and it's coming out next February, March, and it's tentatively called anti-inflammatory. Dr. Strangely Strange, or possibly Zenith. I'm not sure what it is yet.
Yeah.
So I thought what we might do actually this evening.
Oh yeah, there's going to be he's going to have to perform before he leaves as well. But he will, and we don't need to rush to that just yet.
Okay,
unless you do.
whatever you think.
That's nice. Whatever you think. I mean, these things are fairly open-ended. I don't recall that I put a finishing time on this exactly, or how long it should go. I don't know. But maybe we get a couple of more questions from the audience, and then we can turn towards like some music to follow through on this. And there's a colleague from the band. We'll introduce him in a few minutes when we get to that point. Like, any other question regarding the art? Or okay. 1 second now. Your microphone's coming.
Thank you. Just to reflect that it's a beautiful conversation. I wanted to, and I could see the rhythm in the paintings, so I wanted to bring that word in. And classical music, before you mentioned it. And to bring in Toner yesterday. This was a talk that was here. He spoke about traditional music being back in the day, centuries ago, was the classical music, and that it is now finding its place correctly, its position back into classical. Who's to say what classical is? But when you were playing, Martin, on Wednesday night, we were there. The simplicity of, I just heard it at another level because I've been here every year. Yeah. And if you can say classical, I don't know. But I'm just bringing that in. And then I could see the classical music in your paintings.
Good.
And the other word that was missing in Toner's, I felt, was the word healing. And that is my question maybe to you, Tim, if you find the art engagement healing, or to say something about that.
That's a great question. That's right up my street because, as I say, you know, the horror and the violence has been so well described in the arts, on all of the arts. I mean, you can think of Picasso painting Guernica. And my sort of feeling is that beauty is kind of not very fashionable at the moment. And I'm trying to create something that's beautiful and has harmony, has rhythm, has uplift, has joy, and colour. And that's what this series is about, really, is as a counterbalance to all the, when you turn on CNN, you know, something that will lift us, maybe heal us a bit. That's really what I'm after, yeah. And that's what Martin does. I mean, yeah. I've been to see the Gloaming twice, and I've seen you playing as well. Yeah. And I've been to see Leonard Cohen. Yeah. And to me, those weren't concerts. They weren't music concerts. They were spiritual experiences. They were on a different level altogether, feeding into what we are. And that's the most beautiful thing I've experienced in my life.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. Well, to answer your question, I the simpler I play, the better I sound. You know, it's like so simplicity has become a kind of an important part for me, and just transparency. You know, just like trying not to be anything. You know.
Can I just read a poem?
Oh, please, yeah.
Yeah, because just when you said that, I've written a whole load of poems. I don't really call them poems. I call them snapshots, because they're a moment in time where what's happening inside me comes out onto the page. So that they're not sort of technically good poems or anything. But there's something you said there that reminded me. Got a whole list of snapshots here. And this one's called I Bow. Doesn't seem to be there, though. Hold on. Poems for the interview. Here we are. I bow to my helplessness. I bow to all fellow beings who are playing precisely the parts they have to play, they are allotted. I bow to the clarity of the distant shore. I bow to the only hope, the hope of shedding this attachment, this sticky mind, this bag of preferences, the ego we are talking about. I bow to allowing. I bow to no control. I bow to every glimmer of help. I bow to those who sail, oblivious to the harsh realities. In the end, I can only bow to simplicity, to acceptance. I bow to cutting the strings. I bow to a full prostration. I even bow to being unable to bow.
Okay, that's really brilliant.
And while I'm at it, I thought I might read you something that about 7 or 8 years ago I was very ill. I'd been ill for quite a while. And in the end I had to have a liver transplant, which was touch and go. But anyway, it went ahead, and I'm still here with my friend. I call her Christina, after Christina the Ripper, the Queen of Sweden. But anyway, she's in with me here. And so I wrote this and I sent it to the hospital. It's called The Easiest Words. This is a year after we'd had the transplant. When I say we, Georgina, my wonderful wife, who brought me through the whole thing and is a great inspiration in my life. Anyway, I wrote these words because we'd gone out to a wedding about a year after, actually exactly a year after the transplant. We went to a wedding. We went at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and came home at 2 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And these are the words I wrote. We were introduced a year ago today in tragic circumstances. Immediately we became as intimate as is humanly possible. You have travelled with me since then, through thick and thin, through times of grave distress and pain, and times of unbounded gratitude. Although I know nothing of your story, or even your name, I know that you're part of the mystery that we all are. You have enabled me to walk in the world again, and hopefully gain some wisdom about our shared situation, to gain some insights into freedom and compassion. I hope I'm giving you a piggyback. Some days the gratitude that is due is just not there. Other days I stumble on a reminder to bow low to you and your family's generosity. It could never be enough. You died last year, and yet we went dancing together at a wedding last night. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to top that, I think. And I don't think our conversation can go higher than that. It's beautiful, and like your whole story and your approach to painting, everything is so beautiful.
Well,
and,
thank you, Martin.
Inspiring, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Incredible. And so we're going to take a minute or two to kind of go into the Dr. Strangely Strange world with his colleague Joe Toma, who's a fiddle player who I had the privilege of. Well, I met him many years ago. He put on some concerts for me in Kinmare many years, and I haven't seen him since. Oh, there you are. Yeah, I was looking. And anyway, so Joe is going to join Tim here, and it'll just take us a minute or two to get everything in order here. So just hang in for a few minutes here, and we'll be right back.
Just act naturally.
Yeah, act naturally. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is going to be anti-inflammatory. And we're going to play 3 songs, 3 tunes, instrumentals from the forthcoming album. The first one, I'm wearing a different hat now, I'm not a painter. There we are, that's better. Yeah. So I'm going to play, this first tune is, I have 2 little granddaughters, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when they were both born, I wrote a tune for them. And this is, the first granddaughter is called Odessa, and the 2-year-old is called Vienna. So this is Vienna's song.
Now you don't need to do this. We're going to play the next.
Crossing the Soulon.
Crossing the Soulon. It's a tune that came many years ago. We've got it on the forthcoming album. And I would say we've got to have a name for it. I said, we've got to have a name for it. And coming over that beautiful new bypass around the crew, crossing the Soulon River. So it's called Crossing the Soulon. I don't know, does the title bear any kind of relationship to the actual piece of music itself? planned to do it to I said I would never reel after that, but be well enough to go.
So, one more. This is called Morning Song, and this was written. It was actually Georgina and I had been married 10 years, and we was it?
19.
Oh, 18 years. Sorry.
19.
Oh, 19. Sorry. They say a husband only remembers what is it? Only forgets the wedding anniversary once. No, this was actually, how many years after? It was we renewed our vows because I was very ill and thought I mightn't make it. And 4 days later, after that, I had the transplant. So we had a little party and Joe was there. And I'd written this very, very simple chord sequence the night before. And Joe came along the next day and they had a grand piano in the, which reminds me, the grand piano. I inherited a beautiful grand piano from my father, who'd been given this Bechstein for his wedding present, and built in 1890, I think. And I'm going away on a hack here. But anyway, I grew up in County Wicklow, and I suppose I was about 7 years old. I'd never seen a black person in my life, because the black people didn't live in Ireland, apart one or two who were studying at the College of Sturgeons. But anyway, I'd never seen a black man in my life. And I was sitting in the living room, and there was a cocktail party. And who comes in the door? The first black man I'd ever seen, Louis Armstrong. And he played this piano. So I have the Bechstein. And a jazz musician came and played it recently, and when I told him that story, he kissed the piano. Anyway, so I wrote this little chord sequence, and Joe extemporized on it and wrote this tune. And it's called Morning Song, and it goes something like this. Thank you. Thank you. Well done, Joe. Thank you very much. While I'm still hooked up, I'd just like to say a big thank you to my old colleague, and I might even call him a hippie, or originally a hippie, who's done this whole festival. It's an absolute tribute to what he's done and is still doing. So to Francis. Oops.